Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Haunted Houses. Hold on a sec. I heard a noise behind that door.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's episode is brought to you by Nexerciser. Finally, get an easy way to get a six-pack for your neck, only with the Nexerciser. Welcome everybody to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And this is the show where we like to analyze film, break it apart, try to see why it ticks the way it does. Part of the filmmaking process is doing a lot of random things before you ever step on set. And one of the things you got to help me out with yesterday was auditions. Like I'm in the middle of casting, towards the end of casting for a film, a VR film I'm directing next month. And my producer, Ricky, who we had on before, wasn't able to make it. And so Todd helpfully stood in to help run it and do line readings alongside everyone else. So I'm just curious, was that, you've had your own casting sessions before, so you weren't like, stepping in for the first time. But I'm curious if, was that interesting to you at all, or was it just kind of rote and you're like, one casting session is the same as the next?
No, it was great because, I got to kind of like see how you like to operate as a director and what exactly you're looking for. Because in between auditions, we talked about like, okay, what was he like? What was she like? And, what did you like about them and not like? And that's always informative, right? Because as a director, you have, I think a lot of times you have someone in your, kind of like a look in mind, but it's also cool. It was also cool to like see you, switch gears on an actor, right? You had this guy reading for one role and then you said, hey, I'm going to send you some sides right now. I think you might fit for this other role. And like immediately, like I could see your brain working, to and like thinking of possibilities, not just like how are they doing on this role, but where would they fit in the trying to fit someone in, or not trying to fit someone in, but trying to see, could this work, thinking outside the box rather than just saying, is he good for this role that he's auditioning for? Well, maybe not, but maybe he's better for the doctor instead of the nurse or whatever. And that was really cool to see, and to watch you like press that possibility, instead of just saying, he's not right for that role. Like, well, maybe not, but maybe he is better for this one. And I liked that a lot. I also liked seeing, I never get to see other actors, yes, I do my own casting calls sometimes, but it's rare. I think you do way more than me. And so it's really interesting to see how some people come super prepared, other people come not prepared at all. And it is so stressful for me. It was very stressful. There was one gentleman who came in and as you can attest, and he wasn't off book, but at the same time, he was on his phone in his car. And that's fine. He was on his phone in his car. Like, who cares? Like, yep. I don't care where you are. But, every time he tried to navigate away to the script, we couldn't see him. Because that's how Zoom is. Unless you're on Zoom on your phone, like, then people can't see you. And he didn't think about that beforehand. And so we were like, sorry, bro, we need to see you. And so he had to try to get off book like in the moment, and he was just not doing it. So but then you jump in and you say, okay, man, well, how about you send a taped audition, by Monday? And that was really cool. That was like, and he was apologetic at the end of it. He said, guys, I'm really sorry, whatever. And look, we've all got our things, and this wasn't an in-person callback. This was, a Zoom callback. So, it's understandable. And that was really cool that he apologized. But to your credit, you weren't trying to discount him because of the situation. You were saying, okay, bro, well, how about this? Send in a taped audition. I really loved that. I thought that was really cool and refreshing. I think in a lot of time, in 90% of the auditions I've been in, that has not been the case. It's been like you get it in the moment or you don't, and that's it. And I don't see any benefit to that. Either,
Mhm.
Because if you're like that, then not only does that person feel terrible, but also you might miss out on the actual person that you're trying to cast because they're just in a bad scenario, a bad situation. Really, that guy could be a fantastic actor, but you don't get to see that because of the situation that he's in that he wasn't prepared for. Because we can't always be prepared for all the situations we're in. He didn't know that about
Yeah.
Zoom. It's probably, we know that because we're on Zoom all the time. But if he's not, how is he going to know that? He's going to think, you know what? I don't need to be off book. I have the sides. I can just look at them while I'm, and that's fine. But anyway, it was pretty informative for me. I enjoyed it.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I agree, man. I think, I use auditions and callbacks for a lot of things. It's testing someone's ability to show up on time, prepared to do a thing. Especially callbacks for me are a really big deal, because running a production is all about timing, and you're trying to do the most with the least amount of time. Because if you can do 10 things on day one within 8 hours, that's going to be a lot cheaper than doing 10 things in 2 days over the course of 16 hours, And so the more efficient you can be, the better, which also requires everyone being on the same page, showing up on time, ready to do their work. And so callbacks can be really important to suss out who is actually serious about this and who's just pretending, who's daydreaming. And so I use that. But at the same time, weird things do pop up. And seeing this guy, I was like, if I could see there's a little bit of talent, I could, we stayed in it for one full read through of his sides. And that's what you call whenever you go to audition. You're not given a script. You're usually given what's called sides. And it's just the parts that are relevant to you and your character and your audition. And even on the day of production, sometimes you'll get sides, and that's the parts of the script that are pertinent to that day of filming. So sides are a pretty common, lingo in film production. And so we got through his sides one time, and at the end I was like, okay, let's run through that again. I wanted to really hear how he put together certain things, because he had a really good strong look. He had the right kind of vocal inflection, and all the potential is right there. And I was like, okay, let's just see if we can get a little bit of the popcorn to pop. And we saw it, and whenever we had him run through that last little bit one or two more times, I was like, okay, yeah, once it's in his head, the flow is there, he's in the moment. And I was like, okay, yeah, this whole setup is terrible, but let's give you a real chance here because I can see the potential. And I completely agree with what you're saying. You might miss out, and that's the thing I really try to do for my part in every phase of the process, whether it's doing my own casting sessions or even in footage. Whenever I'm reviewing footage and about to make my own edit, I go through every second of the footage. I don't just go to where did the slate or where does the take begin. I want to see what's happening before the take. Like, there's been a handful of times, and granted only a handful, but it happens, where there's this really great moment. I remember a while back we made a film, and the camera op, Andrew, started recording before he had the camera up to his shoulder. So as he hit record, and as he lifted the camera up to his shoulder, the actor was already standing where they were, and it just became this beautiful like boom up move up the actor's body. And I was like, I love this shot, and it was in slow motion. So whenever you slow it down, it kind of removed all the bumps, and instead it had this flowy movement to it. And if I was just worried about where's the slate, I would have missed this opportunity to create an emotional moment. And I try to approach that with the acting too. It's like, man, not everything's going to go the right way, but if I can see the right attitude, like you said, he apologized. He knew he messed up, which is important for me to understand. Is this guy really appreciative of the whole creative process and the way we're in it together? And he has responsibility for his part. And he did. I was like, man, I can work with that. As opposed to, and this is a good contrast, we were talking about this too, and I was really glad to hear your reaction to it. I had an actor, we did Zoom auditions for the first round. And then on the audition, we say, hey, we're doing callbacks next Thursday and Friday in Austin on the east side. We have plenty of parking space. We're not going to do it in the middle of downtown where it's hard to get in and out of. We rented the house on the east side that's central to everybody, easy to park, easy to access, all that stuff. Are you available? And some people were like, oh, actually, I'm in Georgia. Well, first, you saw this was a local hire to Austin. Why did you waste our time with this audition? But cool. Hey, thanks, man. You don't say those things to them because you never know. You might actually need them. So you hold your tongue. But at the same time, if someone says yes, like, yeah, I'll be there. It's 5 hours of driving for me, but yeah, I have no problem. Like, because it's a local hire production. That means you need to be able to make Austin your home base while we're working so that we're not paying for your travel or your hotel. That's all very relevant. And if you suddenly throw that on us, you're effectively doubling your rate, the amount it costs to use you. And on our projects, we're, pretty thin on margins sometimes. And it's important to have all that regimented and understood beforehand. You don't drop this on someone at the last minute. Cool, we're auditioning in Austin, but by the way, we're shooting in Detroit. Like, man, and we don't do that to you. You can't do that to us. Like, this is all everyone communicating properly.
Oh, that's happened to me. But yeah, I get it.
That you suddenly need to be a local hire, like in a completely different state.
I had to miss my daughter's birthday because of it. I didn't have to, but like, I did. It was a good opportunity, but it was the last minute. They switched states on me. Oh yeah, we're shooting in North Carolina and we're not paying you anymore. Like, this is also why you need a good agent.
Yeah.
Because when that shit happens, your rate needs to be a lot higher.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
No, that's completely accurate. You need someone who will fight for you and know when it's time to fight. I think there's bad times to fight that can ruin your name. We had an actor last summer that we negotiated with her beforehand, and suddenly, her agent steps in and starts changing the game plan. And it's like, man, we're never working with your agent again. Like, I hope. And she since left and found another agent. So I have no problem working with her again, but I'm not doing that. That's low-handed way to deal with people. But so one actor was like, yeah, it's fine. I have no problem. I'll be there. And then the day of, she's like, I can't make it. Like, that's just a lot of driving. Can we just do another Zoom audition? And I was like, Ricky, what in the world? Like, this is not okay. And Ricky's not an actor. He's a producer. And so to him, it's like, he is completely empathetic and understanding. He's like, I get it, man. That's a lot of driving just to to roll the dice on maybe you get a yes, but you're probably going to get a no. I wouldn't want to do that either. And I'm like, that's right. That's why you are not an actor. Like,
right, exactly.
This is what we sign up for. Like, I've driven to, had 6 hours of driving. I've had multiple times for no's, that's the game, and this is what you sign up for. And if you're not okay with that, you do not sign up for it. And so we did her audition, and she was okay. And I think if she had showed up, I probably would have submitted her. But because she didn't, I'm like, there's better actors that are better for this role.
That you trust.
Yeah, that I trust, that have earned my trust. And I'm not, your word just took a hit. Now, if I knew this person, I'm like, I get it. And there were other actors who suddenly couldn't show up either, but they had reasons, right? It was like, I booked a gig, and it's filming this, during both of those days. Cool. Let's do a callback on Zoom. Like, I have no problem accommodating that because you're an actor, you're there to work. And so anyway, it's always a fun process. It's always a learning process of finding good talent, that are right for the role, that you can trust. It's a weird, long sifting, process of just figuring it all out. And then of course we'll submit to the client. They'll be like, none of these work. And you just go back to square one. So who knows? Yeah,
of course.
Anyway, a lot of good actors that probably did not have to audition for today's movie. What are we covering today, man?
Today we are covering Dune. So if you haven't seen it, it's just out in theaters, and I believe now on HBO Max, but please go see it in a theater. If you haven't seen it, please pause the episode and go watch it, because we're going to spoil a lot of stuff.
spoil everything. We'll talk about some of the cinematography. We'll look at some of the writing and directing, discuss like the voice and visions and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. The son of a noble family is entrusted with the protection of the most valuable asset and most vital element in the galaxy. And I'm going to butcher all of these names. Directed by Denis Villeneuve. Sure, why not?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people pronounce his last name different ways, so that's
same.
how I'm going to say it. Screenplay by John Spaihts, Denis Villeneuve, and Eric Roth, based on the novel by Frank Herbert. Cinematography by Greig Fraser, starring Timothee Chalamet as Paul Atreides, Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica Atreides, Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto Atreides, Jason Momoa as Duncan, Stellan Skarsgard as Baron Harkonnen, Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck, Javier Bardem as Stilgar, and Zendaya as Chani.
My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air. The outsiders ravage our lands in front of our eyes. Their cruelty to my people is all I've known. What's to become of our world? Paul.
A boy.
Hey, Duncan, can I trust you with something?
Yes, always. You know that.
I've been having dreams about a girl on Arrakis. I don't know what it means.
Dreams make good stories. But everything important happens when we're awake. Look at you. Put on some muscle?
I did?
No.
We are House Atreides. There is no call we do not answer. There is no faith that we betray.
Smile, Gurney.
I am smiling.
The Emperor asks us to bring peace to Arrakis. House Atreides accepts!
I know you. There's something awakening in my mind.
You need to face your fears.
Come with me.
So many questions. So I'm not gonna ask if it was worth the wait. I don't think, with understanding what we now understand, I don't think that's really a fair question. But I am curious if it at least, did you walk out feeling like, oh, this kind of nailed it for me? Or I guess let me rephrase. Like, I walked out and I was like, okay. I saw it twice, Thursday and Friday. I watched it with, first time by myself. I got tickets early, and then my producer, after a long couple days of auditions, wanted to take me out to see it again. And I was like, yeah, fine, whatever. But beforehand, we're in the middle of the day, and he's like, hey, so don't tell me anything. Just, did you? And he didn't get the sentence out, and I was like, Like, that was just kind of my response. I was like, I can't. He's like, oh, okay, I get it. And I was like, no, you really don't. I can't really. It's hard to put a finger on like how I felt about it, to be honest. And so it's a very, I don't know. I don't want to say blah. It's not a blah movie, but because of how incomplete it is, because I didn't realize this is part one. For somehow both times I watched it, I did not see part one clearly underneath the title. Like,
Oh my God. Yeah. Right there.
right there. I was so fascinated with the font of Dune that I was just studying it. Yeah. So I couldn't see it. And it's brief. Like, the title's on there very quickly. And so I'm just curious what your reaction to it was. Were you like emotionally connecting to this thing, or were you hoping for more, or was it right about what you were thinking walking in?
I felt similar. So first off, I went and saw it with a neighbor of mine who hooked me up with early screening tickets. We saw it a week ago, a little more, and we were late. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it just took, because it was a film festival here in Marin, and by the time they let us in, we were, I don't know, maybe a minute late, 2 minutes late. So that whole intro, the explanation, the exposition, missed all of it. Missed the part one. So I'm sitting here watching this, not knowing that, and I had heard that it might have been a two-parter. But, it was just, nobody had seen it. So it was just people, like saying it might be. And then, so I didn't know until the very end, like, oh my God, it is going to be a two-parter. Okay, cool. But throughout the film, I was struggling because I don't know anything about Dune. I didn't watch the original. I watched part of the original, but it was pretty painful. And I started reading reading the book, and the book is way better.
Wow.
But still difficult in its own way. And then watching it, I don't know how to say this without it coming off bad, but I love Timothee Chalamet. I do. I really do. But there was just something about, like, he's just so brooding in this, and not in like the best way. And it wasn't a performance thing. I thought his performance was great.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to put it. But it was just a lot of just him being in his own head, and I think that's part of the story. So it's important. But because the movie is so long, it's a lot of him being in his own head without a payoff at the end. Well, a massive payoff at the end. There is a payoff, but not really. And so we're spending a lot of time, like with these beautiful shots and everything. It just felt a little bit like, man, okay, let's get on with it, I guess, for lack of a better term. And it's so weird to say this because your description of but you still don't understand what I mean by that is perfect, because I cannot tell you necessarily why because also the special effects were some of the best I've ever seen in any film ever. And I saw it on a normal screen, not even Dolby, like it was just normal. And it was unbelievable. I thought, and I was, and to be honest, like, Hans Zimmer is my favorite composer. And I'd seen a clip earlier before I went that this is the best film he'd ever worked on. He's worked on like 130 films. He said, this is the best film I've ever worked on. And so
expectations go really high at that point.
Exactly. I was like, not only expectations of the film, but expectations of the music. And there wasn't anything in there that I noticed. Does that make sense?
Big question to you is like how you felt about the music, because it's fine. With the exception of that kind of tribal woman, like that didn't work for me. Like I just kept hearing Wonder Woman, and it really distracted me, and it felt out of place. It didn't, to me, work. And I think the only way it works is through repeated viewings, just numbing you to it, and it just becomes part of the landscape. But on first viewing, it always pulled me out. I'm like, what is this? Like, this doesn't track. It feels
I'm glad you feel the same way, because I go into a Hans Zimmer scored film, and I expect not necessarily even something memorable. Like I'm not going to expect Interstellar every single time.
Right.
Right. That is a once in a lifetime thing, I feel like. Yeah. Or like once in a decade at least thing. John Williams did it probably a dozen times. Right. But I think there might have been a disconnect here between like the needs of the film and the needs of the score, because if you look at a film, and I know we don't talk about other films on this, but just to bring it in for a second, look at a film like Star Wars, or look at a film like Interstellar, where you have a motif that you go back to that like it like kind of like encapsulates the feeling of the film, right? A few notes, that's all it takes. That didn't exist here. At least that I noticed. There are a lot of kind of like drop things, which are really cool, but that's not a motif. That's like an entire scale. And so I was really looking for that. That's what Hans Zimmer is really, that when he's at his best, that's what he does. And it just didn't give me that feeling. And it didn't make me feel like I was in the, like I was part of this world. I think part of the thing that scores are best at is, they give you that motif. They're like, this is where we're going to live. So when you hear this, you feel at home. And maybe the reason why it's not there is because they are not at home. They are on this planet that's not their home. That's like new and everything is changing all the time and they're learning. But we won't know that until part 2, right? Where Paul becomes at home, where the desert becomes his home. And then now maybe we have this motif that we can go back to. I'm hoping that might be the plan. But it just felt like you said, like everything was just out of place. Nothing felt right. And maybe that's because Paul never felt right. He never felt right in his own skin. Never felt, at home, where he was. He's always searching. He doesn't know if he wants to be, if he wants to rule or not. Like there's all these questions that he has. And maybe because we're living in his head and his head is not, stable, neither is the score. I don't know, but it just didn't. Also, the choices that were made just didn't feel like they helped the shots.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned the tribal thing. I mean, that feels like a duh thing. Like, oh, okay, we're in the middle of the desert, so we're going to hear tribal sounds. Like, come on, it's been done. What else can we do here? Again, the shots were beautiful. I thought that Oscar Isaac was fantastic in it. I love Josh Brolin. The training scene with Timothee Chalamet was fantastic. Yeah. I thought that they had to do a ton of exposition in this because they had to bring in people like me who knew nothing about Dune. And they had to explain a lot. And I thought that they did a really good job doing that.
And what's crazy about that is the reason to break this film up into however many, like I can imagine this being 3 at least, maybe 4 or 5. I don't know. I've never read Dune. I vaguely remember the original movie. I think I watched that like 10 years ago, and that's a struggle. You're absolutely right, man. That's just it's a slog. But and so the reason though to break a movie into so many pieces is to reduce the amount of exposition you really need to introduce. And even within that, they still had a lot of exposition that they had to run through in order to set the stage. And in some ways, I think that's the Achilles heel of this film is you're building a world that you're returning the space opera, right? We're coming back to a space opera for the first time in ages, since Star Wars. I guess I don't know what else I would call a space opera that I've seen in the last 20 years, I guess. But having a space opera means that there's a lot of families, right? There's a lot of enemies and villains and friends that become one of those things, right? Betrayals. And to have a betrayal, you first need to have a relationship that you're placing expectations on. And of course, to have a relationship with expectations, you need to, build that first, like that. So there's all these things that need to be built, and that if you break a film apart into multiple, movies, then that gives you more time to build these things. But yet, even with them, because this whole movie is basically just one big setup, like you really accomplish very little other than establishing who the families are, what their roles in the empire kind of are, more or less, and how the emperor is manipulating these two houses to fight against each other. Like that's all very clearly in there. You're introducing the idea of Spaihts, right? And Harkonnen and the Fremen. So you're and yet, you have 2.5 hours to kind of lay all this stuff out. But because of every time you walk into an epic like this, this feel has a very Game of Thrones kind of feel where you have all of these families and all these houses, and they have all kinds of feelings about each other. And it just takes time to learn who House Harkonnen is and who House Atreides is. And this movie has such a better feel the second time around. Like, I've watched it 3 times now, and the first time I could not have been more lost. But then the second time I was like, oh yeah. That's House Harkonnen. The first time I thought the Baron was the Emperor. Like, I was so confused. And then the second time around, I'm like, oh, okay. The Emperor we haven't met. Like, this is some other dude in some other, place of the galaxy. Whereas the Baron is just the man of the planet. Like, he's jealous and all the other things. And so that took me a lot of appreciation that second time around. I kind of had the same problem as you, though. My first time watching it, I really did miss the opening because I picked a seat at the draft house that was like right next to the kitchen. And so they were just in and out and talking right in my ear. And so maybe the first 15, 20 minutes, I asked, like, hey, can I move to the complete opposite end of this row? And they're like, oh yeah, cool. So I did, and that saved the rest of the movie for me. But I still missed a lot. And if you missed that opening, you are screwed.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger problem too is I think it's fine to have a setup film that is all about learning the sandwalk and what it means to live on Arrakeen and all that stuff. I think the bigger problem was there was just no emotional connection for me. Like, there's no real strong arcs. It's all about setting up his arc. There's really no strong themes, right? And really it's about royalty, and royalty can be so boring, because it's all about stiff upper lip and poise and posture and understanding your role in the family and in the galaxy. And that can just be, it's not fun to watch from a lot of aspects. And I think they really did try, right, to create some bonding emotional connection between Paul and the Duke, before he died. And yet, it still felt kind of formal, and I agree with everything you said earlier. Like, his performance is great, and Oscar Isaac has never turned in a bad performance. Not that I've seen. I've seen him in bad
Rebecca
movies.
Ferguson. Oh my gosh.
She
was amazing. She's probably the best part of this film for me.
I agree. Yeah.
Her pain when he has his hand in the box, the best part of the whole film for me.
Yeah. And oh man, I'm excited because that whole sequence is all performance. It's her reacting and her fear, and it's Paul reacting. So that's the editing and the way they quicken the pace and the intercutting. The music slowly kind of heightens, right? But ultimately, there's no real visual effects there. There's like cutaways to the visions of a hand being burned to ash to kind of give the impression of what he's feeling. But largely it's just acting, great acting and good editing. Like that's such a great little sequence. I freaking love that.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I mean, anytime she was on the screen, I just couldn't help but look at her. She's so beautiful and such a wonderful actress. I was like in it the whole time with her for sure. 100%. And I'm not trying to crap on the movie either, because I think that when it's all said and done and all of these are out and done, I think it's going to be brilliant. Mm-hmm. And so just so we can come back to this episode, right. I'm going to say,
not punch ourselves.
I'm saying this so that in 2 years when the next one, or a year when the next one comes out, and it's like, oh my gosh, now I really get all this. This is so brilliant, the foresight and all that stuff, just calling that out.
I will say, whenever I sat down, I didn't know how long the runtime was going to be. And so I just assumed this could be 3.5 hours. If they're going to get through all of Dune, it's going to be long. And I normally don't, but I just checked my phone right before, the lights went down. I was like, what's the runtime on this? 2.5 hours. Oh God. I hope they don't try to tell the whole story. So I was I was tense the entire time, just hoping that they didn't try to accomplish everything. Because the further into the film you get and realize how far we have not gone, we haven't even introduced Zendaya's character, Chani. And I'm just like, oh man, they better not try to rush that ending. And so whenever it ended, I felt so relieved that I was like, okay, good. They're going to do this right. And man, they haven't even fought the Baron, really, right? They lost to the Baron. So I can see this. And again, I have not read the books. I do not remember the movie. My assumption, based on what they're talking about in this film, is that they got to go to war and conquer the Baron, whatever that means. I don't know if you kill him or you make him your slave and your pet or whatever. And then he's also has his eye on the throne. And so I assume 2 movies at a minimum to take care of the Baron and the Emperor. And depending on how big and bad the Emperor is, because House Harkonnen's richer than the Emperor, so maybe it's not that hard after you take over Harkonnen, or maybe you have to go and recruit a bunch of the other houses, and that's a whole other film. I can see this being a 3-4 part series, and I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the end of it, I think we're gonna say this was freaking genius, and we've needed this in the
especially if it grows musically as well and changes and evolves. Then all of a sudden it's a cohesive thing. It's a cohesive 10 hours of film or 9 hours of film rather than, this contained 2.5 hour, snippet that doesn't make sense on its own necessarily.
And I agree so much with what you said earlier. Made a lot of sense. Like I hadn't thought of it. It didn't occur to me what was missing in the music would have been motifs and themes that really tie characters and to a specific feeling and that kind of thing. But I think they had those opportunities with the visions. Seeing, the future would have been the perfect place to start inserting these little motifs. And then at the end could have really started introducing that big time as a tie-in to the next film. And so maybe there's a missed opportunity there, or like you suggested, maybe they just have a bigger plan in mind on how to approach that. I don't know.
I mean, and I also was thinking when I left, they made this pre-pandemic, and then they pushed it a year. So did they make the other one already? Or are they making it? Do we know, like, when is the next one coming out? Is it going to be another 3 years longer? Like,
I Googled and doing my best to not see any like spoilers or overviews. And I saw someone suggest that 2023 would be the next one. I don't know that that's been confirmed or if they were just kind of, shooting from the hip, but that seems like a reasonable amount of time to crank through this. I'm also curious if Denis is going to continue directing these. If he's in it for the long haul, or if he was just like, I want to introduce this and then produce from the side. I've just never imagined him as like a saga director.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it would be cool, but it also would make me a little sad that we're not getting his other more original stuff. So
because that dude is, with his own stories, oh my gosh, probably one of my favorites. I just don't. I don't see anybody competing with him right now in that regard.
He just wins.
Yeah. What other notes did you have?
So cinematography wise, I really like how much shallowed up the field shots that we had. Like, there's plenty of wide and deep, depth shots that show you the world. But normally in this kind of film, I feel like you shy away from those really shallow shots, which I find interesting for a big budget sci-fi film, right? Because it makes it more intimate and brings a lot more focus on the characters and their what they're thinking and feeling, instead of focusing on the wow factor. And I just think that's the right way to go for big budget films. You wow me with the scale through hiding the scale, right? You keep the focus around the humans, and that makes everything else feel bigger, because we are so small in contrast to these things. Now, they pick their moments to have like big wide aerial shots, right? Oh man, look how massive this spice tanker is, and then you have a worm swallow that thing. Like that's a pretty good use of scale from above and wide angles. But for all these smaller moments, I just really loved how okay they were with spending time in these very shallow moments. It's a nice direction, and that's Denis being character focused as he so often is. There's a lot of flaring in the visions and dreams. So whenever he's imagining things, suddenly we're getting all these sun streaks hitting the lens, and it kind of obscures everything a little bit. And it just gives it a really organic, humanistic feel. It's like you're squinting into the sun. You're trying to see something. And it's there, but it's not there. And it really helps sell the idea that this isn't real time. This isn't reality. He's seeing something. And it's a really easy contrast from the rest of the film, which has very few flarings. Like you don't see a lot of lens flares or streaks across the lens. And that's a very specific way to approach telling visually what the visions and dreams look and feel like to the character. And they also have a fair amount of day for night, especially towards the end, which, I mean, I really like day for night stuff. It just appeals to me for whatever reason. And in this case, it made a lot of sense, especially when they were out there in the middle of the desert, because there is no lighting. Like, and it kind of emphasizes like that we're away from technology and society, and they're on their own, and they're just relying on each other and trying to navigate the night the best they can. And so going day for night there really helps emphasize the lack of technology when they're out there. Otherwise, you know, it starts to feel weird and maybe just a little hollow when you're saying that they're on their own. I don't know. I like it. I think
just a aside with that, like, because I like day for night stuff too, but I think and I think you would probably agree, it depends on, in a lot of ways, it depends on the genre, right? I mean, look at a film like Sicario, another Josh Brolin film, right? Like, they just shot night, right? So like, you know, in some of those scenes where it was just like, it's just dark and you can't see anything, right? That was purposeful. That was like real life, needed it to be real as possible. And so shooting day for night would have felt very not real, right?
Yeah.
You know? And then, but in this film, you know, it's sci-fi, which means that you can get away with a lot more. Also, like it does do that thing that you were just mentioned about, like, it, you know, you don't have any light source there, so you shouldn't be seeing them very well. But at the same time, we do need to see them. We need to see their actions. So, as opposed to like in Sicario, some of those scenes that are at night, we just need to know they're there. We don't need to see what they're doing. And so it really depends, I guess, not just on the genre, but on the purpose of it. Right. So in this case, this was perfect to do day for night. I thought it was, you're spot on, right? We need to see their actions, how they're moving through the desert, that they're doing the walk and
that they are in the desert. I think that's a really good,
yeah.
You're pointing out something really good. Like, that you can see them walking through the desert, and it also creates a little bit of tension because you're acutely aware of sandworms and you're kind of anticipating, am I going to see the tremor pop up? And if you can't see deep into the background, that can begin to hinder that sense of tension and setting. And so shooting day for night is just the easiest, cleanest, and smartest way, I think, to go about accomplishing all those goals. Yeah.
I can't imagine what all that sand did to the cameras. Like, oh my gosh, that had to be a nightmare to be the camera tech.
Yeah. I wonder if they use like rain gear in order to kind of keep the sand out. Underwater housing is what you'd normally call that. And so I wonder if that was a thing they did, if they just said, no, we're going to use air compressors and constantly like clean these things out.
I don't know. That's just something that I didn't think about during, which says a lot about the film.
True.
That like, I'm not thinking about that, especially because we do this podcast and we talk about that kind of stuff all the time. But so that says a lot. But now that we're talking about it, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That had to be a Herculean task.
Totally. And real quick, I'll just run through the beats of the story for, if you only saw this once and you're a little confused, maybe just touching on a few of these elements will help clear up some of the issues and give you a better overview. From the couple of easy things, spice, right? So spice has two different significances. For the Fremen, which, do I get back to the Fremen at any point? Yes. Okay. So for the Fremen, it's sacred. It's a hallucinogen that brings them long life and enormous health benefits. And the prolonged exposure to it also turns their eyes blue. And so that's how you can kind of tell who's been around Arakan for a really long amount of time and ingesting like spice. But spice for everyone else is necessary for interspace travel, which made it the most valuable substance in the universe. And therefore Arakan itself, a highly contentious planet, because you have the people who live there and just want to exist in, peace. And then you have everyone else who wants to go there and steal their resources, which you can draw parallels to in our world through multiple time periods and land geographies. And for the Bene Gesserit, so the Bene Gesserit is his mom himself is he's not Bene Gesserit. I take that Bene Gesserit as like the Catholic Church. It's not a thing. It's an organization, a people group. And so they have their own plans, right? The Reverend Mother even says, our plans are measured in centuries. And we have other prospects if Paul is not the Messiah.
The one.
Yeah, the one. And this sounds very Catholic churchy, right? This is the way the Catholic Church thinks. My favorite line from Spotlight is whenever they're talking about trying to, take on the Catholic Church. And he's like, you don't understand. They think in centuries. They don't think in months or years or decades. They think in centuries. That's a whole lot. And so the Bene Gesserit kind of have this very Catholic church vibe to them, even whenever they're preparing for war on Harkonnen, where that Gimli Prime or whatever it's called. They're kind of going around and giving everyone this Ash Wednesday kind of mark on their head as they're preparing for war. Like, this is clearly a representation of Catholicism, or at least borrowing, some of that imagery and ideology as a means of generating this idea of the Bene Gesserit. And then they're crossing bloodlines. So part of the thing is they can control if they have a boy or a girl at birth. And the mom, Lady Jessica, decided to have a boy, and the rest, the Reverend Mother and the rest were like, you're playing with fire, man. Do you know what you're doing? You're being very arrogant right now, because they've been crossing bloodlines for thousands of years in order to try and breed the perfect Messiah, a mind that can break space and time, past and future. And so probably this is going to be our Paul, or at least that's where all the stars are aligning to be. This is Paul. So at some point he's going to be able to break space and time and blend the past and the future and meld it to his will or something. I have zero idea of what that could mean. If that means suddenly Duncan is dead, but he can bring him back, or he can bring his father back. I don't know. That could be cool. And could lend to some really fun moments, later on in the film. And then the Reverend Mother negotiated with the Baron to save Paul and Lady Jessica, probably in faith that Paul could be the one. She needs to make sure he's taken care of. And also, I guess, keep your place in society. If you allow someone to run roughshod over your group, you lose power in the eyes of everyone that matters. And so you kind of need to protect your own and step up, just to keep your own balance of power. Because if they can do that to your followers, why can't they do that to you? Like, you go down a notch. And so I can see them, manipulating things for their own way. And then the Arakan people, at a certain point, are chanting for the Messiah, right? When they land, they're saying this phrase, and that's when they translate whatever that Arakan phrase is into, it basically means Messiah. Okay, cool. But the other comment that I think his mom makes is the Bene Gesserit have been preparing the way for centuries. And that's very Catholic, right? They're converting native people to their religion, and almost using them for their own ends. And so whenever you factor in like Atreides, Harkonnen, what was the other one? House Carino was the one that pops up at the beginning to say, hey, the Emperor says he's assigning you to Arakan. Right. So we're getting a bigger and bigger sense of this world. And Bene Gesserit is not just there to serve. Like, they're running subterfuge and doing their own thing. And to some extent,
I'll cut it out.
All right. They're doing their own thing. And so it's very Catholic. The Catholic churches, throughout history have been their own, state. And point in fact, they kind of have their own state within Italy, right? The Vatican City is its own thing, man. They stand apart from Italy, from what I understand anyway. Story-wise, we also have the Arakan, like control of Arakan or Arrakis, is a whole point, the center of this entire story of this movie. The Emperor staged a war to weaken both houses. He saw Harkonnen become richer than himself, and he sees Atreides gaining more power, right? And so he's like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take away Harkonnen's planet and give it to Atreides. And now I'm just going to watch and let the drama unfold to my advantage. That's what the Emperor's thinking. And so then you also have Atreides. They rule on their own home planet, Caladan, through air power and sea power. And what the Duke tells his son is that on Arrakis, we're going to need desert power. This is about building our force. We need the Fremen. We're not there to rule them. We're there to partner with them. And ultimately, I can imagine he wants to give them their planet back while he uses them as he gives them protection and aid, and they do the same. Like, everyone's going to win in that scenario. I would imagine that was his plan, before he died. And so,
yeah, well, they do a good job of setting him up to be a good guy too.
Yeah,
they have that he has that conversation with Paul in the graveyard or whatever, and basically tells him, even if you don't want to rule, the only thing I've ever needed you to be is my son. Like, this is a good guy. This is not a guy who's coming to be a tyrant over other people, and I think they do a good job of showing that.
Good point. It paints that whole house as someone you can root for. Like, this isn't just a balance of powers of terrible people. It's like, no, there's clearly someone that we like and we want to get behind. And that is very much the moment that they kind of solidify that idea that you're not here to just do what I want you to do. You're going to be your own person. And if that's what I'm hoping for, great. If not, great. That's okay.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. So I think that kind of covers the general storyline from there. I think everyone gets the smaller pieces or the bigger pieces, that Harkonnen struck back. The Emperor did what they wanted them to do, or whatever. And we're set up for him joining the Fremen and becoming joining forces, whether that's becoming one of them or finding his middle ground of I am all these things, which I think is what he really needs to be. You can't just suddenly be entirely Fremen. Like, you're still Atreides, you're still Caladan, but you also need to find what these people can offer you to help you grow into the man that you need to be. Yeah. Writing and directing. One, I love the slow pacing, like letting a lot of these scenes breathe. Characters can react on their own time. Denny is always fantastic on this. And it's one reason to study him for me, is just understanding rushing does not get you as many dividends as really letting people have space to have a moment digest, or when to let that digest. It's not like they don't have moments of shouting and yelling and running around. But those things just have more impact when you really let these things unfold and the dramatic moments take their time to build and release. I love the voice, the whole voice command. I thought,
I love that.
They executed amazingly. The first time we see it was at breakfast, which gets into kind of a very common movie trope or setting way to establish your film is getting up in the morning. We see how things go, and it's fine. Like, I think a lot of people think, that's just a wrong way to go. It's not. It's really more about structure, substance more than structure. The structure of it's fine to begin in the morning, It's more about what are you trying to achieve? What's different about the way they go about this than you normally would see in your own life? And in this case, right, he wakes up and he's just trying to have breakfast. We, of course, learn that he has dreams and that he's lying to his mom about having a dream last night. But he wants water. And water is such a cool way to introduce the voice because water is important. Later in the film, water is vital to survival. And him asking his mom for water is very telling of their relationship and what she provides to him. She provides him life and his ability to continue. And so I take it as a very early foreshadowing, symbolic feature of this scene. But then on top of that, she says, I'm not going to hand it to you. Use your voice to make me. And of course he does it one time. She's like, no. Like, use the voice. And he does it. And it's so cool because we see him speak, but we don't actually hear him for like a couple of heartbeats later. And then the voice kind of booms. It's like a sonic boom that hits after the fact. And we can see the first time you watch the scene, it's very confusing. The second time, it made so much more sense because you see her hand him the water, but then she didn't hand him the water. And you're like, wait, what just happened? So I didn't piece that together the first time. The second time, I was like, oh, she felt it and it was close. She almost like pushed the water over to him, but it didn't work because, he just didn't have full control of the voice. But I love that kind of the voice itself is this bassy treble mixture with all these layered voices. It's not just his voice. It's like the Reverend Mother's voice. And it's like the full power of the church is coming behind it to get you what you want. And then we see that again when the Reverend Mother herself commands him, and that of course pisses Paul off. But it progresses what the voice is and what it does and how it feels to have it used on you, because we're identifying with Paul. And so whenever she commands him, he closes his eyes as we're pulling away, like the camera pulls away and loses focus. And then we kind of do this quick push in, and suddenly we cut to this kind of wide shot of him walking into frame and realizing what just happened. Like, we feel the confusion and sudden arrival, much like the character does. You don't realize what's happening to you. You black out. And so seeing it from this perspective is really cool. And what I love about it is it's so well executed for an idea that could easily be very corny and hokey. It's delicate instead of just having someone like go into a zombie trance, which could work. I'm not saying it's the wrong way to go about it, but his way of executing it is so much cooler. And throughout the film, you get maybe even some bigger ideas of the ways that the voice can be used, right? The voice command on that alien pet thing, right? That black thing that's kind of eating out of the dog dish. And she's like, get that thing out of here. And the dude is like, our pet doesn't understand our language. And then she commands it, right? Get out. And she looks at the dude. It understands. And so it makes me wonder, one, that pet is definitely coming back into play at some point. But then it also makes me wonder, can we use the voice against the sandworms? If it's not just limited to humans, could it be used against the sandworms? I don't know, but could be cool.
Well, and then they use it in the chopper when they make those guys kill each other, right?
Right. And it also introduces the idea that guy's deaf. So you can't use it against him. He's deaf. So maybe the worms are out because I don't see ears on them, but they're really big, weird, ugly creatures. So who knows? But yeah, you need to be able to hear the voice in order for the voice to work on you. It's an audio thing. Yeah. And that's a great little sequence. And I don't know. Another cool staying on that idea of directing interesting script elements, was the Baron levitating. I love the way they handled it. The first time we see it happen, right? We see his back kind of light up, and we cut to this big wide shot as he's talking about Arrakis, and he floats into the air. And I love that they gave him this big gown because it makes him larger. It's less silly visually. You can kind of feel him tethered to the ground still, even though he's not. And it gives him this very worm-like or snake-like threatening whatever silhouette. Like he suddenly becomes this big, empowering figure, which he is in this world, of course. And then later on, they take away the gown, but he still floats, except we see it out of focus, and he's coming into the frame way out of focus. And by the time he is in focus, it's really just a close up of his feet, just kind of the tips of them grazing the table. And it's freaking dope, man. That's really hard.
It's amazing.
I like that you hide the effect where you can, right? Because floating can be really cool, but it can also be silly if not done carefully. And so you have to pick and choose your moments of the way you make someone float. It can't just be always having someone suspended in the middle of the air. But if you can kind of obscure it in fun, interesting ways, you can still get the power of it without pulling the audience out and laughing at what you're trying to do. So it's a delicate thing. And I always appreciate that. I think that's one of the things that's always pulled me away from Superman. I just have struggled with that aspect. Well, the early Superman, those never a whole other thing. And so, the visions are messy, and I love it. There's so much room for interpretation because you don't know if what he's seeing is going to be literally what happens, and sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's more impressionistic, and they set the stage for dreams and visions being a lot of things, right? Before the credits, before anything, the cold open of the film is this alien voice, and the translation is dreams are messages from the deep. And then, as we heard in that clip we played at the beginning, Duncan is like, after hearing Paul's dreams, he's like, dreams make good stories, but everything important happens when we're awake. And so there's this, you can say they're contrasting, or maybe just adding context and value to what you do with dreams is more important than the dream itself. And I like that a lot, because later on at the end of the film, he has this vision right before his big fight. And he's seeing himself get stabbed and die and bleed out on the ground. And on the one hand, we're combining that with Chani saying, hey, this guy's a really good fighter. You don't have to suffer. And here, take this knife. It'll be an honor for you to die with this in your hand. You have no idea. And then now we're seeing this vision of him dying. So you can create some tension here, like, oh, is this when he bites it? But instead, if you listen to what the voice in his vision is saying, when you take a life, you take your own. And so seeing himself being killed is really good, because it's creating an idea of the value of life and what killing does to you and does to your soul. It's very spiritual in that way, and I really appreciate them creating that value in the eyes of Paul. And it's very much in keeping with what you were talking about earlier with that house Atreides, and the way they view the world and their place in the world. And it's emphasized once again through him struggling to take a life. And that moment is so good when he's trying to get the guy to yield. And everyone's like, whoa, what are you doing? And then he does it a few more times before Javier Bardem's character is like, is he toying with them? Like, this isn't okay. His mom's like, no. He's never killed before. It's like, oh crap. And so you feel the significance and the weight of him killing someone. That's cool. It's cool.
So I love that you're talking about this. I have a question. Do you think that guy is coming back?
I was debating that. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think he literally comes back. After watching this 3 times, I think he's going to have visions of this guy, and this guy is going to become like a brother to him through the ether. He's going to train him through the ether, not literally in person.
I hope that's the case.
Right? It's kind of this Obi-Wan aspect, I guess. Crap.
I hope that's the case, because when I left and walked out, I thought, man, they're totally going to bring that guy back because of a few things. One, he has all these visions of this guy training him, but also they were carrying his body, and they made it a point to show them carrying his body, like not just a shot of them all, of multiple people carrying the body, but a shot of the body being carried. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I'm just So I'm like, why are they being that specific, showing that, that this thing is being carried by these people, not that these people are carrying a thing.
Yeah.
Which is it's like subconscious almost, and so that made me think maybe he's going to come back, but I hope it's more along the lines of what you're suggesting, where he has these visions, he goes to these places, and this guy, his spirit trains him in a way that would be so much cooler if that's the case. I don't know.
That would be cool. And also selfishly, because I think that guy is a really good actor.
I know.
His range was really amazing. It's hard to come unhinged, and he has these really wild moments, and it just works. By contrast, I love Dave Bautista, but his unhinged moments early in the film felt a little forced.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I didn't know what was going on there too, because I like him as an actor. It's kind of weird, like I obviously he plays a totally different character in Guardians, but I love him in that.
Yeah.
No one else could play that.
No.
But yeah, you're right. It's those unhinged moments that made me feel, it just felt not right. I don't know, weird.
And so, yeah, I hope we get what we want out of that. And now the last little bits of notes are just kind of random. Some of the bits of world building that they do. One of the things Ricky pointed out that I noticed on my third watch was how much that portal in the space looks a lot like the sandworms, right? It's this really long tunnel looking thing with this huge kind of gaping mouth that very much reflects the sandworm. And I don't know if that has any bigger idea behind it, but I thought that was interesting. I love all the languages. Creates a lot of depth of the universe, right? You have the ancient tongues that people are speaking in different languages that require subtitles. Brilliant. And then you also
the book that he reads, the Fremen book,
the text,
have it all written down in a different language is awesome.
Freaking cool. And then you have like the Atreides sign language that seems that is specific to them. And it's a great way to have your own conversation with other people in the room. That's just brilliant. I really love that touch. There was, and I want to talk a little bit about bad dialogue and good dialogue. There was one line in here, and maybe a few of them, but this one kind of struck me the most, that I was just like, I don't think that's appropriate. When Paul, they're putting on their suits with his mom, and he's like, now we have to go find the Fremen. Are you good? And I'm just like, are you good? Like, what year is it? Is this, are they still talking this way 8,000 years in the future? Is this how casual a duke speaks? Like you're kind of royalty, and you're talking like you just stepped out of 95. And so just are you good is wrong. I would have preferred like are you ready? Something that's a little more formal and fitting of the character. I don't know how that kind of thing slipped through. It just felt wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being super nitpicky, but I think little things like that add up. And
who was saying?
Paul said this to his mom.
Paul said it to his mom?
Yeah, he was like, "Are you good?" It's like, "What? Are you good?"
I mean, I guess I could see that sliding. He's a kid, He's
but he's trained.
He's not.
There's no TV. I don't know. That feels a little too American. It feels very slang and improper language. Like I don't imagine royalty speaking that way in Buckingham Palace. Like even in modern times, they're not going to.
I think I would have had a bigger problem with it if she would have said it to him, or if his father would have said it to him or something like that. But
fair enough.
I don't know. But I get it. I can see the issue there.
Whereas there's a piece of good dialogue that I really liked. It's simple. It's as simple as "Are you good?" Which was "The night is fading," and it's this simple little idea, but it tells you a lot about the Fremen, right? Because the Fremen see the nighttime as their daytime, and they think in terms of night as safety. And this is our hours of operation, and it's an inversion of life and thought, where daylight means safety to us. Here it means death. And so the night is fading is very significant, like safety is fading.
Great point.
and
Great point.
It's simple, and I love little touches like that, and that's why language to me, can be really important and significant, and tell a lot about your world and your story through tiny things.
Yeah, I mean the picture of night fading is it's just a beautiful flip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Pretty
Wow.
cool. Not a lot of guns here. Mostly swords and knives and missiles, and some lasers, but not a lot of guns.
Dude, the lasers. Oh my gosh, that was dope.
That was great.
Like just cut through anything. So cool.
And then he starts flying. Duncan even has to encounter like a big laser, right? He's flying around the city, trying to avoid that. I think that's a great little scene. Pretty cool. And then I don't know if you felt this way, but the Iraqi city looked very Blade Runner to me. Like the angles and the architecture. I wouldn't be surprised if they ripped out some of the Blade Runner sets and actually used it for this. But it sent me down this little train of thought. I was like, I wonder if this is still Jodorowsky's influence, because the original Dune was supposed to be made by Jodorowsky, and he had worked with H.R. Giger to come up with all kinds of style and architecture to represent, that the original like Harkonnen was supposed to be a certain kind of thing. And since he didn't do it, this big binder became a massive influence. Jodorowsky's prep work for Dune became a massive influence through Hollywood. And I would recommend anybody to go watch Jodorowsky's Dune, because it talks about how big of an impact his pre-production had on American or even, filmmaking throughout the world. Because Ridley Scott, that's how he came across H.R. Giger when he was making Alien. And so you see all those ideas kind of recycled through Alien. And of course, Ridley Scott made Blade Runner. And so I can see that influence kind of seeping its way all the way back into being this cyclic thing that Denis says, let's go back to the roots. Let's go back to the original vision of this thing and play around in that. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking out of my neck, but it would make sense to me. Yeah. My last thought is this story feels like a sci-fi fantasy version of Lawrence of Arabia. It just has all these telltale signs of war being fought over this piece of land being a significant part of the war. And then you have someone that's going to go and raise up an army out of the sand dunes in order to fight against the Empire. Like, this is so Lawrence of Arabia written all over it, with the added wrinkle of the resource. Now, I don't think Lawrence of Arabia had much to do with oil, but whenever you start thinking about spice in terms of transportation, oil, the Middle East, like you can see a lot of these things kind of playing in harmony with each other as a parallel to the Middle East and things, conflicts that have happened over there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Maybe if nothing else, it was just a way to frame the story and to be inspired and say, hey, what are all the pieces that I can pull from and reimagine to tell a whole new story? Yeah, I don't know. I'm always fascinated with the ways that you can generate a new story by being inspired by other completely unrelated ideas and history and things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can take an existing story and add a few things and it's a whole different story, even if it's the same story, mm-hmm. right? So I think these parallels 100% exist. I totally agree. Lawrence of Arabia thing. I didn't even think of that, and you said it. And I was like, oh my god, yeah, that makes total sense. But if you actually think about it, there's really only a handful of stories that have ever been told, and we're just what is it that Bono said? Every poet, it's one of my favorite lines he ever says. Every artist is what is it?
I've heard you say it
is a cannibal. Every poet is a thief. We all kill our inspiration, sing about our grief. Just one of the best lines ever. And I think it's so true that, we look at things, and even if we think that we're original, we are so influenced by things that we've seen, heard, and that's okay. That's all right. Add your your flavor to it. And this is just another one of those examples. And, there were no sandworms in Lawrence of Arabia. You know what I mean? It wasn't necessarily spice, but it's also about relationships and about how you respond to those relationships. Are you going to embrace aspects of them, or are you going to shun aspects of them? Like it's the human condition to have to make that decision, right? Yeah, spot on with that for sure.
Nice.
I loved it. I thought it was brilliant in so many ways, and brilliant in that I probably don't see the brilliance yet.
Yeah. I'm excited for where this goes. I'm 100% in. It's gorgeous. The set design, the production value is incredible. I think the lineup of actors is unbelievable. You have in one movie to have Oscar Isaac, Stellan Skarsgård, Josh Brolin, and Javier Bardem and Rebecca Ferguson. Like GTFO, man. I am all about it. Anything after that to me is just icing on the cake. And I'm never gonna shy away from Timothee Chalamet, and I'm super excited to see Zendaya keep getting these really meaty roles. I'm really enjoying seeing her career take off. Euphoria is excellent, and she is incredible in that. And so I can't wait to see what else she has. This is just a dream of a lineup. Yeah. So
agreed.
What are you going to recommend this week?
Yeah. So, okay. It was kind of a toss up. So last night I, my wife and I, and my kids, believe it or not, I think we decided to let our kids watch stuff as long as we're there, to let them watch stuff that we normally wouldn't, because they've proven that they can go to school and not say some of these words that they know not to say, and that they know are wrong. And, they know the difference between, like what they see on this picture square and real life. Anyway, we watched a documentary about Robin Williams on HBO, and it just kind of hit us a little bit, his brilliance, but also his brokenness, and how a lot of us are broken and don't even realize it half the time, especially till it's too late. But I want to recommend 1 Hour Photo, because there's an aspect of that film I feel like is so on, and it's been a very long time since I've seen it. So I'm recommending it because I want to go watch it again.
And so I assume you sat and watched 1 Hour Photo with your kids, right?
No, definitely did not do that. We watched the documentary, right? And then we stopped at a certain points, when it just got a little too much, but especially at the end. But yeah, it's an underrated film, I feel like, of his. But I think it's his performance is one of, for the ages. There's just something about, I think, the honesty with him. And there's one interesting thing that I'll say, and then I'll let you get to yours. That they have the director on the director for 1 Hour Photo on the documentary, and they said that in between takes, he'd be like super serious, and then the moment they said cut, he'd start joking instantaneously. He'd be hilarious. And the director, I forget his name, but he said, I just let him do it. It was almost like the funnier he was, the better he was in the following take. So the moment he would say something and the entire crew would lose it, he'd say, okay, and action. And then instantaneously he would become this whole other person. It was like he had to get this out. He had to get out all of this, all the jokiness, the funniness, basically do a brain dump in order to be able to inhabit this other character. And those were the best performances that he got out of him, were those moments. It's very eye-opening, the kind of person that someone like Robin Williams, has to be when he's in front of other people, but then how he's like super quiet. He was super quiet, like alone and on these sets. So anyway, 1 Hour Photo.
Dude, nice. And I assume you're talking about Come Inside My Mind?
Yes.
Documentary. Yeah. Nice. I made it halfway through and I was just struggling. I was like, I can't. I keep meaning to go back to it because, how much I love them, but it's also hard to watch because of how much I love them.
Yeah, it gets harder.
Good.
Getting easier past halfway.
Perfect. So, I'm going to recommend, so I am a huge Oscar Isaac fan. He's got so many great things, even on HBO specifically. He's got at least 2 incredible things. One of them is, I think it's called PU 234 or PU 232, something like that. And it's a movie about yellow cake uranium. And it's the first time I remember seeing him, and I didn't know it was him at the time. I just remembered him being excellent and Paddy Considine being excellent. But he also just made another series on HBO that's called Scenes from a Marriage. And
Whoa.
it's incredible. And I mean, it's challenging. It's all about, it's a drama about marriage. So, draw your own conclusions from that description. Right. But as good as he is, Jessica Chastain puts on an absolute clinic. I think this is her greatest performance. And I think she's a really wonderful actor. Wow. But I felt like this is when she found a whole other gear. Like, this is far and away her greatest performance she's ever put in. It's unbelievable to me anyway. And so
Dude,
I
can't wait to dive into that.
Yeah, I could not have been more happy to see them both acting together, but to see just where she landed. Because I don't know, sometimes I think she, shows up and does a good job, but her voice doesn't always follow her performance. And hearing her voice kind of change, she literally to me has a different voice in this than she's ever had. And so I was just blown away. And if she keeps channeling this thing, I can't imagine I won't see everything she does on opening day. Like, she is so good. Wow. Now that I've overbuilt that, stay tuned for next week. We're going to cover Daniel Craig's final James Bond, his last time out as 007 in No Time to Die. So stay tuned for that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to drop us a review, subscribe on iTunes, all the things. Leave us a note. If there's something you want us to cover, maybe we will, maybe we won't. You'll never know if you don't try. And if you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Dune.
And our quote of the day is from Catherine the Great. I love this quote, man. This is amazing. You philosophers are lucky men. You write on paper, and paper is patient. Unfortunate empress that I am, I write on the susceptible skins of living beings. Where did you get that?
I don't know. I was looking for a good quote about royalty and what it means to rule, and finally I was like, oh yeah, Catherine the Great. Like, she's one of the greatest rulers in history, and I'm sure you can make a really good argument she was the greatest ruler. She did so much for the progress of women and the progress of her country, which was not her country. Like, she was not Russian. She married into Russian royalty. And I forget if she was French or where she's from, Austrian or whatever. But yeah, she stepped in. And so if you haven't seen The Great on Hulu, go watch that. I want to say Elle Fanning, and she's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I was just curious, what does she have? And that was the first one that popped up, and it just blew my mind. I was like, damn, that's hardcore. Because as a philosopher, right, and you get her meaning. Like, as a philosopher, you get the luxury of ruminating in ideas that may or may not have an impact. As an empress, what she says and does kills people. It saves lives, it kills lives, all of it. But the way that she phrased it, right? I write on the susceptible skins of living beings. And it kind of goes back to my point about royalty and the way they speak. It's a different level of elegance in the way you see and discuss the world. And I wish we had a little bit more of that. And you didn't have to go full Roman, speech, but I like that idea of their stature is different. They feel and speak and think differently. And yeah, great quote. I don't know.
Dude, I got both of those things queued up now. Scenes from a Marriage and The Great.
Dude, you're gonna love it. I bet you may want to cover it. It's so good. And
what, The Great?
The Great, because she's great, and then I forgot Nicholas Holt. Plays her husband, and he's gonna kill you. Like he's amazing. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm excited about that.
Man. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. It's been a long time in the making for this film, so hopefully you enjoyed it. Please, like Wes said, share us with your friends and make recommendations. We'd love to hear what you'd like us to cover. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.
Spaihts.